For 36 years, from 1787 to 1823, rich families across colonial America sent their difficult sons to St. Augustine Seminary in Virginia for religious schooling and spiritual fixing. But not a single one of those boys ever came back home. Church records show that 247 students were sent there during that time, yet not even one graduated as a proper priest. What really happened to them stayed a mystery until 1998, when workers fixing up the place found some documents. Those papers showed the seminary was really a fancy prison and blackmail setup, all hidden under the mask of religious education. Most places won't talk about this story because the Sterling family still has more power than people think. Before we keep going with Father Edmund Sterling's twisted seminary tale, make sure to subscribe and hit that bell. This kind of story is only for serious mystery lovers. And let us know in the comments, what state are you watching from? The Sterling family always knew that secrets were the most dangerous kind of wealth. Back in 1787, Virginia was full of giant farms making money off tobacco and slavery, run by rich families who didn't want their secrets coming out. The Tidewater area had lots of rivers and big private estates, making it the perfect place for people who liked to do things quietly. It was in Henrico County that the Sterling family became powerful names in both money and religion. Edmund Sterling, born in 1751, was the third son of a tobacco dealer who got rich using methods that no one wanted to ask about too much. Unlike his brothers, who took over the family's real businesses, Edmund got something more valuable. He understood the dark side of people really well, and he knew just how to use that to his own advantage. When he said he wanted to open a Catholic school in a mostly Protestant state, his family just thought he was being overly religious. They didn't know it would turn into one of the richest crime businesses in all of early America. St. Augustine Seminary was built in 1786 on 340 acres of thick woods. It was far enough from Richmond to stay hidden, but close enough for rich parents to visit their sons. The fancy stone buildings workers brought from Europe, and a beautiful library made the place look like a real school. Edmund Sterling had studied a little at the College of William and Mary. Then he said he found religion, started calling himself Father Sterling, and brought in a team of men whose pasts were just as shady as his. The seminary's reputation spread fast among Virginia's upper class. Here was a Catholic school run by a well-bred man who promised to teach sons who had become problems. These were boys who had seen or heard too much, or who knew family secrets that could ruin the family name or cost them their money. The school didn't just offer education. It promised to keep everything quiet. It was private, safe, and most of all, promised to fix their sons. But what those families didn't know was that Father Sterling had no plans to teach their kids religion. He wanted to learn everything about those families, their money, their secrets, and exactly how much they would pay to keep those secrets hidden. The first group of students showed up in the spring of 1787. 12 boys, aged 16 to 23, all sent from rich families. Their names were on shipping records, land titles, and government deals across Virginia and the Carolinas. Each family paid £50 just to enroll their son, enough to build a whole house at that time, and promised to send more money for their son's spiritual growth. They thought they were paying for privacy and a second chance, but really, they were helping destroy their own families. By the fall of 1789, people started to notice something strange was going on at St. Augustine Seminary. It would take many years for anyone to figure out the full truth about Father Sterling's plan. Jonathan Whitmore, the oldest son of a rich shipping man from Charleston, was sent to the seminary after he found mistakes in his dad's cargo records. Mistakes that showed the family business was more than just tobacco and rice. When October passed and no letter came like usual, the Whitmore family sent their trusted man, Thomas Hartwell, to go check how their son was doing. What Hartwell found at St. Augustine didn't make sense. The seminary looked totally normal. He could hear the evening prayers coming from the chapel, see lights on in the study hall, and watch the usual routine of a religious school. But when he asked to see Jonathan, Father Sterling gave a strange answer. The boy was in deep spiritual retreat. Sterling said he had gone through a big religious change and needed full isolation from the outside world, even from letters and visits from his family. Hartwell, who had spent 30 years handling secret business for the Whitmores, knew when someone was dodging the truth. He asked if he could at least see Jonathan from a distance during prayers, just to make sure the boy was okay. Father Sterling agreed, but gave a weird rule. Hartwell had to stay hidden at the back of the chapel and couldn't speak to Jonathan at all. That night, when the sky turned dark around the stone chapel, Hartwell stood quietly in the back corner. What he saw there haunted him for the rest of his life, even though he never fully understood. What he had witnessed at the young men walking in for evening prayers all moved in the exact same way. Their faces calm but almost empty. They answered the prayers perfectly together, never looking at the visitor area, never acting bored or distracted, which you'd usually expect from young guys stuck together like that. The creepiest part. Hartwell counted only 19 students in the pews, even though Father Sterling had said there were 37 boys enrolled. In that dim candlelight, Hartwell thought he saw Jonathan Whitmore's face, but the boy who left Charleston full of fire and rebellion was now sitting there quietly with a blank, worshipful look like he didn't even remember his own name. When Hartwell went back to Charleston and told the Whitmore family what he saw, they had a terrible decision to make. Their son looked alive and was being guided spiritually, just like they asked. But something deep had changed in him. If they demanded he come home, people might start asking questions about why he had been sent away in the first place. So the Whitmores chose to stay quiet, just like Father Sterling had hoped they would. They kept paying the seminary, telling everyone around them that Jonathan had found his religious path. That story was easier to live with than the scary truth that they may have given their son to something worse than any family scandal. Over the next few months, the same thing happened in other rich families around Virginia. Sons who were sent to St. Augustine wrote letters home, but the letters were all strangely alike, full of love for God and peace. Parents who visited found their boys strangely changed. They were calmer, less curious, and seemed oddly okay with everything around them. None of the families talked to each other about their strange feelings. The reason their sons were sent away made it easier to stay quiet than to start asking hard questions. And Father Sterling counted on that silence, just like he counted the rising fees for spiritual growth. As the 1790s went on, St. Augustine Seminary's name became more respected in the secret conversations of the Virginia upper class, but people only whispered about it, or spoke in careful hints that the seminary had turned into something new in the world of colonial society, a place where troublesome sons could be sent without any messy public drama, and without cutting them off from the family completely. The families who sent their boys to Father Sterling ended up stuck in a shared mess, all tangled in the same dark secret. Each one had chosen to send a son to St. Augustine for reasons they couldn't say out loud, created a web of secrets that kept them all quiet. The Randolph family sent their youngest son away after he found out his uncle had been secretly trading slaves, which broke Virginia laws and would have ruined the family's name. The Carters sent their oldest boy when he started asking about tenant farmers who'd gone missing on their Rappahannock land. The Byrds handed over their son after he saw a late-night meeting that linked his dad to some accidental deaths of business enemies. What none of these families knew was that Father Sterling was quietly keeping track of every secret, every scandal, every bit of shameful info that got their sons sent there in the first place. His private study, up in the seminary's tower, had detailed files on each family's weak spots, names, dates, places, and even testimonies that the boys had given during their spiritual Counseling. The brainwashing process the boys went through at St. Augustine was slow and carefully planned out. At first, the new boys lived in cozy rooms and were treated nicely. They went to real religion classes taught by Father Sterling himself, who, despite his shady background, actually knew a lot. The food was great, the library full, and the daily schedule was strict but not harsh. But after a few weeks, small things started to change. The boys wrote home saying they felt really tired, blaming it on the intense religious lessons. Their handwriting looked different, more neat and stiff. Their letters got shorter and sounded more like a script thanking their parents for sending them to such a great place. But here's the creepy part. Their evening wine had been mixed with just the right amount of laudanum and other drugs, which Father Sterling got through his medical friends. The doses were just strong enough to make them hooked and calm, but not strong enough to make it obvious. With no letters or visits from the outside world, and with everyone always reminding them that they disappointed their families, the drugs made the boys quiet and obedient. By 1793, Father Sterling had it down to a science. He could guess almost exactly how long it would take to break a new boy down and turn him into what the parents wanted to see. Usually, it took 4 to 8 months, depending on how strong-willed the boy was and how big the family secret was. But the real genius of Father Sterling wasn't just changing the boys. It was how he controlled their parents. As the months turned into years, he started raising the fees. What started as a £50 payment turned into hundreds, then thousands. He said it was for new spiritual classes and deeper religious lessons. But really, families were paying to keep quiet about the secrets their boys had spilled in those early talks. When parents tried to argue or asked to bring their sons home, Father Sterling would gently remind them of what their sons had told him during their private talks, things about the family, business, past crimes, or hidden truths. The choice was always polite but clear. Keep paying to keep their son on the right path, or take the risk of their biggest family shame being exposed in Virginia's high society. Most families kept paying. By winter of 1798, 11 years after the school started, Father Sterling's setup had turned into something way bigger than just squeezing money from nervous parents. He created what he called the Virginia Arrangement, a blackmail system that pulled the strings of nearly 20 top families in the colony. The whole setup ran perfectly, like clockwork. Boys who had been there for years were moved out of the regular dorms into private rooms in the ... The basement levels were supposed to be for deep thinking and prayer. These rooms were carved out of the limestone under the building. They were comfy enough so it didn't look like jail, but locked tight so no one could get out. The students down there hardly ever came to regular prayers anymore, because people were told they had moved past needing group worship. At the same time, new students kept arriving all the time, so the school looked like it was running normally. These new boys brought in more money and gave Father Sterling more secrets about their families. Father Sterling got really good at spotting which boys knew the most dangerous things about their families. Those boys ended up staying in their spiritual retreats for a very long time. What happened to Charles Randolph in 1796 shows just how much Father Sterling's methods had changed and how scary they had become. Charles was sent to St. Augustine after he found out that his dad was using tobacco exports to hide the money from illegal slave deals, which broke both Virginia and U.S. laws. At first, Charles wrote letters home saying the usual stuff, strict rules, homesick and all that. But as time went on, his letters started to praise the very business he once hated. He even said nice things about those shady trade deals he used to call evil. When Charles's younger brother, Thomas Jefferson Randolph, came to visit in early 1799, he saw that Charles had totally changed. Now Charles talked like a businessman, explaining crop plans, shipping dates, and how to handle workers in ways that made the most money and the least legal trouble. He also said he now accepted slave trading after doing deep Bible study on the topic. By But Thomas Jefferson Randolph was sharper than most visitors. He saw that Charles's eyes were always wide, even though the sun was bright in the visiting room. He noticed Charles's hands shook a bit when he wasn't talking. And when Thomas mentioned their old dog's name, a dog they'd loved for 7 years, Charles didn't remember it at all. Normally, this would have just been a weird family issue. But Thomas made a big decision, one that would blow the whole St. Augustine operation wide open. Instead of telling his parents right away, he quietly started his own research on the seminary's history and what really went on there. Thomas had the perfect background for this. As a junior partner in his family's shipping company, he had access to business papers, letters, and contacts all over Virginia and the Carolinas. Even better, he was good at keeping records, just like his grandfather, and always questioned things that looked too perfect. Over the next few months, Thomas followed the money. He found that a lot of big families had paid way more than normal school fees. Many were also giving extra cash for special services that no one ever explained. He checked shipping logs and saw that the seminary was getting weird supplies, a lot of medical tools, drugs, and building materials that looked more like stuff for a prison than a school. But the most shocking thing Thomas found was about the students. Out of 247 boys who had enrolled in 11 years, less than 24 could be found afterward, as in, actually, seen again, living normal lives. Almost all of them had totally disappeared after they entered the seminary. That's when Thomas knew his brother Charles wasn't just brainwashed by some odd religion. He might be trapped in something far darker and more dangerous. Things got even riskier in spring 1799, when Thomas found out wasn't the only one asking questions about St. Augustine Seminary. Through his shipping business contacts, he found out that other families had also hired people quietly to look into the school. They all reported the same strange changes in their sons and complained about how much more money the seminary kept asking for. But these families were also learning what Thomas already knew looking into Father Sterling meant: risking their own dirty secrets. The same secrets that made them send their sons away in the first place. Every time someone asked questions about the seminary, it led to things those families didn't want anyone to know. Things finally moved forward when Thomas met Martha Henley, a widow whose husband was a doctor in Williamsburg. He died under odd circumstances in 1797. Dr. Henley had been one of the few doctors who treated rich people quietly, never asking about strange injuries or medical conditions. They didn't want to explain. Martha had all of her husband's patient records, along with a pile of debts. And in those papers, there were notes about visits to St. Augustine Seminary. Dr. Henley had been asked by Father Sterling for medical advice about using opium on young men. He wanted to know the right amount to make them hooked on the drug, but not so much that it would make them look sick or dying. The doctor's notes showed he went to the seminary many times. Between 1794 and 1796, he looked at students who clearly had been given drugs over a long time, but people at the school said they were just having spiritual problems or religious visions. The most upsetting notes were from just before Dr. Henley died. He started writing down how uncomfortable he felt about what was going on at the seminary. He said some of the boys were clearly not just spiritually sick. His last note about the seminary was just one sentence: "The Sterling arrangement is a deep violation of both medical rules and basic human decency." When Thomas showed these papers to Martha, she told him something even worse. Her husband had been getting ready to tell the government what he knew about the school. She always thought his death wasn't natural, but she didn't have proof or power to fight back. So Thomas and Martha teamed up to find a way to bring down the seminary. But they had a big problem. If they made this public, it would ruin all the families whose sons were trapped there, including Thomas's. They had to find a plan to save the boys without revealing their family's dark secrets. Their idea was smart, but risky. Thomas would use his shipping company to help colonial authorities accidentally find out about the crimes at the seminary. Meanwhile, Martha would make sure there was medical evidence to prove what the boys had suffered. But just when they were about to act, they found something that made everything worse. Martha went through her husband's records one last time. In his old medical bag, she found a hidden pocket. Inside were papers that showed how bad things really were at the school. The seminary wasn't just locking boys up and blackmailing families. It was killing students who couldn't be controlled by drugs or who knew too much about their family secrets. There were drawings and notes about what Dr. Henley called staged accidents. These were fake suicides, fake illnesses, and fake accidents to kill certain boys, without making it look suspicious. It seemed the doctor had been forced to help cover up these murders. There was even a list of students who had already been killed over the past 11 years. It had 23 names, exactly the same number as the death certificates filed at the school. But what scared them most was a second list labeled pending resolution. That list had 12 names of boys who were still alive, including Charles Randolph. Thomas Jefferson Randolph now knew his brother wasn't just locked up at St. Augustine Seminary. He was marked to be killed. Just when we thought things couldn't get worse, the horror in Virginia's hills went even deeper. If this story is creeping you out, share it with a friend who loves dark mysteries. Click that like button to help us keep going. And don't forget to subscribe so you never miss stories like this one. Let's see what happens next in this wild story about human greed and secrets. The race to save Charles Randolph and the other boys marked for death had started, but Thomas and Martha were about to learn something scary. Father Sterling had known about their plan all along. On the night of May 17, 1799, Thomas Jefferson Randolph and Martha Henley came to St. Augustine Seminary with a risky plan to rescue the trapped boys. Before Father Sterling could finish what he started, what they found in the stone basement would stay with them forever and show just how huge this secret crime ring really was. The bottom levels of the school had more than just cells for students. There was also a full medical lab where Dr. Henley had been forced to help with things Father Sterling called spiritual interventions. The drug supplies Thomas had seen in shipping papers were being used not just to control the boys, but also to fake believable deaths. They found Charles Randolph almost at the end of Father Sterling's kill process. He had been given way too many opiates and was being slowly poisoned so it would look like he was dying from a sickness like consumption. Martha found medical notes saying Charles would die by the end of the week. His death would be reported as caused by spiritual exhaustion and a weak body. But Charles wasn't even the worst thing they found down there. In the private office deep in the basement, they found Father Sterling's personal records. At everything, all 12 years of his crimes written out in detail. It didn't just show student files and family secrets. It also proved how Father Sterling's plan had spread. He had gone far beyond just blackmail. He used what he learned from the boys to mess with business deals, politics, and court rulings all over Virginia and nearby. There were files about illegal slave trades, unpaid taxes, fake land sales, and corrupt deals with judges and colonial leaders. Even scarier, Father Sterling had been selling these secrets to British spies. So the seminary wasn't just a place for fake religious learning. It had also become a spy center helping the British keep power in the colonies. The rich families' payments were being matched by British money. They were buying dirt on powerful Americans to use against them. But the worst part of all was in Father Sterling's letters to his British bosses. He wasn't doing this just to get rich. The seminary had been built on purpose to tear apart American society by controlling its most powerful families. The British were secretly helping the seminary as part of their plan to keep control over American trade and politics, even while the colonies were trying to become free. The boys in those basement cells weren't just victims of family drama. They were stuck in a bigger game between powerful empires. They were being used to help the British spy on and control America. When Thomas and Martha tried to get the boys out of there. They found out something terrible. Father Sterling was ready for this. The teachers at the seminary weren't just religious men. They were actually trained guards with weapons and military skills, and the school building itself was built like a secret fortress. It had layers of security and hidden weapons built right in, all over the building. The fight that happened next showed who Father Sterling really was. He wasn't just a crazy religious guy or a regular criminal. He was actually a clever spy who used religion and family problems to build one of the smartest spy networks in early America. "You get it," Father Sterling told Thomas as armed guards circled around the rescue team. "If you tell anyone about this place, you'll ruin every single family whose secrets we have. Your own family's slave trading crimes alone," he said, pointing to a folder of the Randolph family secrets, "would get you arrested. Make your family go broke and leave your name ruined for generations. Your brother Charles," he added, "knows everything: shipping records, shady deals, business secrets that could destroy not just your family, but a whole bunch of others tied to Virginia's economy. Keeping him alive is a big danger to things the British care about." That's when Thomas realized this wasn't just about one family. Father Sterling was ready to blow up the lies holding all of Virginia's rich society together. Thomas wasn't choosing between saving Charles and keeping the family name clean. He was choosing between keeping Virginia's fancy imagier, showing everyone how dirty and unfair it really was underneath. "Choice is easy," Sterling said. "Let us finish up with these boys quietly, and we'll keep all your family secrets safe. But if you try to stop us, we'll show the world what these families have really been hiding." But Thomas Jefferson Randolph had been getting ready for this exact moment, and he didn't come to St. Augustine Seminary alone. Fixing the mess at the seminary meant big changes were coming for Virginia. Thomas's long investigation led him to a bold plan that Sterling never expected, to bring all the hidden corruption into the open. He worked with Martha, Henley, and a small group of powerful people whose families had also been tricked and blackmailed by Father Sterling's spy web. Together, they made a plan that would risk their own status but save the students and shut down British spying in Virginia. On the morning of May 18, 1799, militia groups raided the Seminarian, arrested Father Sterling and all his British agents. At the same time, Thomas and 17 other big-name Virginia familiars stood in public and admitted all their illegal business deals, crooked political actions, and social wrongdoings. It shocked everyone. Families that had ruled Virginia for years were suddenly facing prison, money problems, and being cast out. The Randolph family's confession about slave trading crime started the biggest criminal case in Virginia's history. It showed how many rich families had been breaking the law for years with shipping scams, illegal trades, and backroom deals. But the plan worked. By coming clean themselves, the families took away Father Sterling's power over them. They also broke the British spy system that the seminary supported. The confessions were carefully done to show the crimes but keep military and political secrets safe from Britain. Charles Randolph and 18 other boys were saved from the basement. But it wasn't a happy ending just yet. The drugs they were given messed up their bodies and minds. Some of them never got their memories back, and all of them had to fight through serious drug addiction. Charles, especially, couldn't remember much from before he came to St. Augustine, and he kept the quiet, obedient personality that had been forced on him at the seminary. They cared more about business than worrying about whether it was right or wrong. They found 23 bodies buried in secret graves on the seminary grounds that proved Father Sterling really had been killing students who were too hard to control or who knew too much about dangerous things. The victims were sons from some of the top families in Virginia. Their parents had been told they died from exhaustion, illness, or other natural causes. Father Sterling himself vanished during the raid on St. Augustine Seminary. Even though people searched everywhere, he and some of his top helpers were never found. Some folks think they ran off to British land or got smuggled away by spies. Nobody really knows. And that mystery scared people for years. It made folks worry that maybe this was still happening somewhere else. After this whole mess came out, it affected way more than just the families involved. People started getting really upset about the British spying in America. It helped build the anger that led to the War of 1812. Some families who got tricked by Sterling started helping the fight for American freedom. They didn't want foreign countries messing with their lives anymore. Right away. The scandal also brought big changes to Virginia's laws. They made new rules to stop this kind of deep corruption from ever happening again. Now, churches and schools that took in students had to follow stricter rules and get checked on more often. But the part people remembered most was how this whole thing changed how rich families raised their kids. They saw how hiding family secrets could be used against them. And they learned that sometimes the only way to protect your kids is to be honest about the very secrets you're trying to hide. Thomas Jefferson Randolph was never the same after all of this. He found out his family got rich by breaking serious laws, and that his brother had almost been killed to cover it up. Charles made it out alive, but their bond was never the same again. They both knew now what their family was willing to do to stay powerful. After the scandal, the seminary sat empty for almost 50 years. Locals said they heard strange sounds and saw weird lights in the old building. When someone finally bought the land in 1847, workers found hidden underground rooms that hadn't been found the first time. There were even more papers down there that showed Sterling's whole spy operation was bigger and more organized than anyone thought. This creepy story shows U.S. how chasing money and good reputation can twist even the strongest family love and destroy true faith. When families are willing to give up their own kids just to hide secrets, they open themselves up to be used by anyone who knows how to take advantage. So, what do you think about this wild story? Do you think we learned everything about what Sterling did? Or do you believe there are still secrets hiding in Virginia's hills? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. If you liked this story and want more creepy tales like it, go ahead and subscribe, tap that bell, and share with your mystery-loving friends. The greed inside people goes way deeper than most think. And only the bravest people are willing to look that deep into the dark. Come back next time to hear another shocking tale about just how far people will go when money and their name are on the line.